Hey guys, how we doing? How we doing? Thank you guys for tuning in. My name is Kareen with NewTX Realty, and this is my first YouTube video. So it's probably going to be terrible, but just bear with me. It'll get better, I promise you. But yes, I do have some very important information that I want to share with you guys. And the hope is that this information can be used to simply just make better decisions, whether financially, whether personally, whether business wise, because we're in some very, very dangerous times. So, the name of this video is Inflation is Killing Us. And I was thinking, hey, what should I name this video? What should the first video be about? And one of the things that I've realized is over probably the last year, um, I've been having conversations with a lot of clients, and what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is just downright scaring me. And it's crazy because it's one thing to know that, okay, your house is on fire. It's another thing to know your house is on fire, but because it's so scary, you just act like it's not on fire. Like, hey, I know it's burning down, but let me just play my favorite song and maybe it won't burn down as much. So basically that's what I'm seeing and experiencing. And before I get into this video, let me do a bit of my introduction so you know who I am and what my credentials are. Again, like I said, my name is Kareen. I am a real estate broker and investor here in Dallas Fort Worth. The name of my brokerage is New Texas Realty. I have three properties, two which are revenue generating. So I'm also a landlord. And I wanted to put that in there because another thing that I've been noticing is we have so many real estate investors who are selling courses and who have one, never done any transactions, and number two, have never owned any real estate. So I think that's very, very important. That if I'm going to be talking about these things, that I actually do these things on a daily basis. So that's very, very important to me. But another thing about me is that I am a millennial. And that is a very important distinction because my generation, as well as the next generation after us, the Gen Zers, and I think it's Alpha or something like that after that, but we're all getting screwed. We're all getting screwed. We are the most educated generation in the history of this country. We have bachelor degrees and master degrees and law degrees and PhDs, yet we're the most in debt in terms of college debt. And basically, reports have already come out and said we are not going to have the same quality of life as our parents' generation, which is probably the boomers. So that's why I say inflation is killing us. But in addition to that, originally I'm from Brooklyn, New York. After college, I spent 3 years in the banking industry, and I worked for Capital One as well as TD Bank. And there are no TD banks here in Dallas. They're mainly focused in Canada and on the East Coast. So kudos to you guys if you actually know what bank I'm referring to. But another distinction I do want to communicate up front is that this video is not explicitly to sell you a house. You don't have to worry about this is not a commercial or marketing or anything like that. One of the things that I realize about myself that I learned as I began my professional career is that I've always had the yearning to help people, regardless of in what industry or in what particular area. That's just has always been like a passion of mine. So with that, I've been here in Dallas since 2014, and during that time, I've had the opportunity to help a ton of people, not just in the real estate world either. but just in the financial world, and just using my knowledge and my experience that I've gained from the banking or investing or whatever it may have you, and just helping people make better decisions and positive effects, having positive effects on their lives. So, uh, jumping into this, inflation is killing us. So, I do want to start off just so we can have a baseline understanding of what inflation is. So, let me share my screen with you guys so we can get this party started. Okay, here we go. So, this is a Yahoo Finance article. It just came out a little over a week ago. And I want to pay attention to this information right here. It's where you rank by income, and it's based on a Census Bureau study from 2022. So, because this is based on a report from 2022, and now we're in 2024, in my personal opinion, I think these numbers are actually low. But I wanted to put this up on the screen so, if anyone's watching this, you can kind of have a much better idea of where you fall. Um, Lower class, lower middle class. In my opinion, I would group those two together, and I would consider that group as poor. A single individual, and we're not going to do this by wealth. This is strictly income, and we're not going to include any children. We're not going to include any student loan debt or any credit card debt or medical debt. This is just a single individual with an 800 credit score. So if you're a single individual with an 800 credit score, no children, and you make up to $58,000 a year, I would consider that as poor. This right here, where it says middle class, I would consider this more working class. The upper middle class, I would consider this as middle class. And then the upper class, I would consider this as the upper middle class. So again, I think that distinction is very important because as we go ahead, we're also going to talk about how inflation impacts these groups differently. So poor, working class, middle class, and upper middle class. Okay. So you know what? So let's go ahead and jump into it. Inflation. So this article is from the International Monetary Fund. And again, I'll pin all these articles up under the video so you guys can access this if you do have any questions. So, what is inflation? So, in order to explain how inflation is killing us, we got to first know what it is. So, here it says inflation is the rate of increase in prices over a given period of time. Inflation is typically a broad measure, such as the overall increases in prices, or pay attention to this, or the increase in the cost of living in a country. But it can also be more narrowly calculated for certain goods, such as food, or for services, such as a haircut, for example. So let's just pause right there. So, as a basic example, let's say I got my haircut in October of last year and I paid $35. And then let's say I got my haircut in this year, February, and I paid $35. So that would mean, oh, there's no inflation. The prices didn't increase. That would be great. Now, let's say I purchased a dozen of eggs, no no organic, no free range, hormone free, none of that stuff. Just a dozen of eggs from the store. Let's say we went to Whole Foods in October of last year and I paid $3.50 for those eggs. And then I went to the same Whole Foods and got the same eggs in February of this year. And what would happen if I paid $7? Well, we may probably be rioting in the streets, but that's neither here nor there. But that would mean that it was an increase in prices in that period of time of $3.50, which would signal 100% inflation. So now that we have a baseline understanding of what inflation is, how is it killing us? So, one of the things that I've realized is that when I attempt to have these conversations with potential clients or just people that I meet out in the street, a lot of times people don't want to talk about anything negative. And I don't know if it's, and 9 times out of 10, it's usually my generation people. Uh, I can't even recall the amount of times people have just said, I don't talk about negative stuff. No, I'm not with the bad vibes. And I also know the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. So if I don't admit I have a problem, then how am I going to be on the road to recovery? So, an example of this is this right here. So, we just had the Super Bowl. Usher just put on a great halftime show. Them tickets are selling on out. Actually, my wife just purchased about 8 of them. I don't we just got them just in case somebody else want to go. But but so this is what's on everyone's mind right now. And again, it's always great to have a good time. We work hard. We're the generation of, hey, I want to live for experience. Like, hey, that's great. But what happens if you don't have $1,000 to cover an emergency expense? Hmm. 44% of Americans can't pay an unexpected expense from savings. We're just not wired to save, expert says. Now, that I would have to disagree with. I don't think that as a group of people, we aren't wired to save. I think if we had enough income and enough money, we would be able to save. The common issue that I hear from people is that, man, everything's just so expensive now. What I used to pay for something is more expensive, and my paycheck hasn't grown enough to cover those cost increases. So I can't save. Okay, that sounds simple enough. But the amount of people who don't know this, very, very scary. And again, like I said, I'm a real estate broker and a real estate investor. So if we're all focusing on this, Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, Usher performing at the Super Bowl, these tickets, oh man, everything is just great. But we're not listening or even paying attention to this. A record number of Americans can't afford their rent. Lawmakers are scrambling to help. The reason why I wanted to use this article as well is because I mentioned my generation, millennials, as well as Gen Zers. In November of 2023, I had a retired woman ask me, excuse me, Kareen, would you be able to assist me in finding a cheaper apartment? Unfortunately, my apartment has continually raised the rent, and I'm on a fixed income, and I can no longer afford it. So I need to look for somewhere cheaper. But specifically, if you can focus your search on a property that's specifically for maybe retired people or elderly people who are 9 times out of 10 on fixed incomes. So luckily in that situation, I was able to help that lady and find her tax credit apartment that was cheaper than what she was paying, and she was able to move in no problems. But this issue right here, if the and this woman was in her 60s, if the baby boomers are having problems paying rent, and then Gen Xers are having problems paying rent, and then the millennials, us, who the most educated generation ever, we can't pay rent because we're moving back in with our parents and renting rooms, and Gen Zers too. What does that mean? Well, let's go back to the groups. So for the lower class and lower middle class, I consider this as poor. How does inflation affect the poor? Well, it destroys them. And the reason why it destroys them is because the poor have to use a greater percentage of their income to survive. And the same thing would happen for the working class. And the same thing even happened for the middle class. That's why the middle class has consistently, over decades, been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Because as inflation is increasing, our wages are not able to keep up with these rising prices. So now you have not just the poor class and not just the working class, but also the middle class who are falling into poverty because this inflation has been so detrimental to us. So one thing that another example I want to give. So we understand the definition of inflation, and I've also gave some examples. But let's see here exactly what we mean by this by putting pen to pad. So this right here is the CPI inflation calculator. And again, all these links will be pinned to the bottom of the video, but this is important. So in January of 2016, I purchased my first property for $135,000. Let's see what that would cost in January 2024. So the same house that I paid $135,000 for in 2016, that same house in January of 2024 would cost $175,742.86. So again, let's go back because I'm trying to keep it simple for everybody. So if prices are going up, the poor, working, and middle, they have to pay more to get the same thing as before. But why doesn't inflation affect the upper middle class? And the reasoning is exactly what I just showed you guys. Upper middle class and wealthy, rich, whatever you want to call it, tend to have large amounts of income that they can deploy to invest in appreciating assets. So, for example, when I say I have 3 properties, one, my primary residence, 2 more, which are revenue generating. So, let's say those other 2 properties, I paid for them years ago. My first rental property, I think I bought in 2018. So, if I own multiple properties and I don't have to do anything, literally don't have to make any type of updates, any type of upgrades. But because of inflation, they just raise in value automatically. What is that going to do to my wealth level? It's going to increase it. So inflation is benefiting tremendously the upper middle class, the wealthy, the rich, whatever you may classify them as. While at the same time, that same inflation is destroying the poor, the working, and the middle class. That's it in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. That is it in a nutshell. So, something else that I want to share with you guys is this: the median sales price of houses sold in the United States. Did you see this line? You see, okay, it was pretty shallow here in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then 90s, 2000s. It's starting to get a little steeper, and then oh wow, it shoots up, and then we hit the Great Recession, so it goes back down. And then what happened at the end of the Great Recession? President Barack Obama created this program called quantitative easing, where the Federal Reserve would purchase mortgage backed securities. And what did that do? That skyrocketed that inflation up, 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 and then COVID, and then it just skyrocketed even more. So, this same inflation that's increasing the net worth of the wealthy class because they have more disposable income to deploy in appreciating assets such as homes, stocks, companies, businesses. These are all the things that generally appreciate over time. So, as these home prices are going up, what else is going up? Mm, the rent. The rent is going up. And if the rent goes up, and if a person can't afford their rent, well, then they may be homeless. I don't know about you guys, but my time here in DFW, uh, I have seen a steady increase in homelessness. And this is not homelessness amongst people who are drug addicts. No, I am starting to see homeless working adults, men, women, sometimes whole families, tents right in downtown Dallas, in front of City Hall, in front of the library, along the sidewalks. We have the beautiful Omni Hotel. You walk around to the park, you have homeless people just sprawled out all on the sidewalk. And a lot of times I've spoken to a lot of these homeless people and I've asked them like, "Hey man, how did you wind up homeless?" And I know back in the days, someone was homeless is, oh man, they probably mentally ill or probably on drugs. I'm starting to hear stories now where it's just, yeah, man, I couldn't afford the rent. And then they evicted me. And then once I got the eviction, I couldn't find another home because no one would rent to me. Uh, and it's just been tough. Try to go to the shelter and the shelter's full and then it's disgusting because they have bed bugs. So I don't want to be in there. So I'm just hoping maybe, I can find something, but I'm still working and I'm saving all my money. Guys, inflation is killing us. It is killing us. So that's about it. Like I said, this is my first ever YouTube video. One of the things that I intend to do with this newly formed channel is just provide information to you guys. Again, like I said, a lot of these things we've heard about, but when we dive into it, do we truly understand how these things are affecting us negatively today? So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I don't want to let this video run too long, but I hope you were able to learn something. And I hope this information is able to help you make better decisions in your life, whether financially, economically, professionally. So thank you so much for tuning in. Uh, I have about 4 subscribers. So if you do feel that this information is important or beneficial to you or anyone you know, please like, comment, share. And yeah, we'll be sure to grow together. So once again, thank you guys so much for checking in. And until next time, this is Kareem with New Texas Realty. Thank you guys.